May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So, this is a big law day, right? The gospel was hard. And we're going to focus on other things because there are plenty of nuts and bolts of the law to work with throughout our whole lectionary today. We'll save the gospel for another detailed time. I'm going to start with the psalm. I always call Psalm 119, our psalm today, the lawyer's psalm. And we only sang 8 verses of it. And it goes on for 176 verses. It is the longest psalm among the psalms in our psalmody, and it is the longest whole chapter in the Bible. And while I see it forming on your lips, no laughing about long-winded lawyers, okay? The reason I call it the lawyer's psalm is that the language is focused on decrees, commandments, judgments, statutes, and the psalmist uses 8 different words interchangeably for these things. For laws, in every 10 verses or so, he even exclaims, "Oh, how I love your law. It is my meditation all day long. It is sweeter than honey in my mouth." I feel that way myself. I know that sounds pretty nerdy, but don't you too, in a way? Not about the law, but about whatever it is that is your experience and your expertise. Maybe your education, maybe a hobby, maybe a job you have. But it becomes almost the light of your path, the lamp that lights your path, maybe even the way you see the world, your perspective. Your experiences form you, and you become, your eyes adjust to those experiences. In the bit we sang today in Psalm 119, the psalmist says he will thank God with an unfeigned heart when he has learned God's righteous judgments. "I will keep your statutes," he says. The law that the psalmist is talking about here is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it's really comforting to think that just following God's laws and learning God's righteous judgments will be a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And the law shows up again in our Old Testament reading today, right? In Deuteronomy. Moses has reached the end of his patience with those wandering Israelites. And when you read the whole thing, you have to agree, they were a little bit quarrelsome. I mean, first, they didn't like the manna. There was too much manna. They got tired of that. It quails again tonight, Moses, really? And then they were thirsty, and he got them pure water. But then they got into trouble at the bottom of the mountain when Moses went up to Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, and there was that bit with the golden calf. So Moses has reached that point, and he's making it just plain with them here. He says, just follow the law. They've wandered all over the ancient Near East at this point, and they're hungry, thirsty, tired, and really, really kind of quarrelsome. Our reading today happens after all of that wandering. Here's what Moses says. "See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, and death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God and observe his decrees and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous." Just follow the law. But living in community is hard, right? Well, it's pretty clear how to follow God's laws, how to love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. When we're living together in community, we sometimes find we have different views and backgrounds and priorities. Many times, following Jesus, being a disciple, is not about following a law to choose between good and bad. That's fairly easy, even for us manifestly flawed human beings. And any good lawyer will tell you that great lawyering is about following the law to get to the best interests and thriving of the whole community. Following the great commandments, loving God with all your mind, heart, and soul, and loving our neighbors as ourselves is all about the flourishing of the whole. Following Jesus, discipleship, is less about choosing between good and bad than it is about choosing between competing goods. As we walk through these last weeks of Epiphany, we're preparing for Lent, our time of holy reflection and contemplation when we remember Jesus' 40-day temptation in the wilderness to prepare for his earthly ministry. And we're also approaching the order deadline for Palm Sunday. That's when the church remembers Jesus' walk into Jerusalem at the beginning of our celebration of Holy Week. So how do we prepare? How do we prepare for our earthly ministry as followers of Jesus, as all our sacred and secular calendars are interweaving in real time? How do we use God's great commandments as a lamp to our feet and a light to our path? Here's a real question, a concrete example. Shall we order eco palms or shall we order traditional long palms? I remember the long palms. You know, the flexible kind, they're about like that, 3 feet long, pointed at the end, and if you kind of hold them at the inch-wide base, you can flick the kid in the next pew up, which is what I did and probably what my kids did as well. They're yellow in the middle, going to green at the ends and green at the point. Eco palms are essentially fair trade palms. At least half of the farmers in central Guatemala earn additional income from harvesting palm fronds. And more than a quarter of household heads support themselves exclusively by collecting fronds. Each palm plant produces from 2 to 5 harvestable leaves over a 3-month period, and palm gathering actually protects our natural forests. It's interesting, palms harvested in this way are whole fronds, a single spiky stem and then the rays radiating off that stem. I've seen this kind of palms before in nature, although not in church on Palm Sunday. I grew up with those long pointy ones I mentioned. And I remember sitting on a high stool in the kitchen, Trinity Episcopal Church in Watertown, New York, where I grew up. I probably was about 6 or 7 years old, sitting with my grandmother and all the other church ladies, learning how to fold the palms into the crosses. Anybody know how to do that? Down kind of a third of the way, then you go quarter turn up, right, left, and then wrap it all the way around. So do we order eco palms? They may be unfamiliar to our memories in church, but they offer hope and health to the families who harvest them and the forests that grow them. Or do we order the treasured long palms of our faith and memory? I don't know. But I do believe that asking ourselves that question is at the very nub of our Christian engagement, of living together, of practicing God, and of preparing ourselves for our earthly ministry. And it's a really great question for us to work on in community because it's not a matter of scriptural accuracy or orthodoxy at all. Because when Jesus went from Bethany to Bethphage and got on the donkey, according to his instructions in the gospel, and rode down the Mount of Olives, and people were throwing down their cloaks, and something we'll talk about in a minute, that was at a time in the 1st century when palm trees grew down in Jericho, in the desert around the oasis of the spring. And on the coast, up the coast in Akko, in Jaffa, near modern Tel Aviv, in Caesarea Maritima, but not in Jerusalem, It was not until the 1960s that people brought palm trees up from Jericho and planted them outside the Damascus gates into the old city, where they thrive now. But that wasn't a thing then. So when Jesus got on his donkey to go down the Mount of Olives, our scripture tells us, this is the most common translation, that the people threw leafy branches in his path. Green branches, branches from the trees in most translations. And given the type of growth now, that is very likely olive branches. That's what grows there. So discerning the values and priorities of our community is the central focus of living in community and practicing God. When we live with the great commandments as a lamp to our feet and a light to our path, we guide our actions, our decisions, and our priorities on that main road of loving God with all our heart, with all our mind, and with all our soul, and loving our neighbors as ourselves. And this is never a road that leads to the win of one and the loss of another. Discipleship, practicing God in community, is not as simple as right and wrong. Not as simple as one right, one wrong, a pair of binary decisions marching 2 by 2 down the path of the great commandments lit up by the golden rule. Practicing God is not a zero-sum game. Instead, the great commandments guide us on a path of loving compromise and reconciliation that leads to the best interest and thriving of the whole community. We'll have many opportunities in these next months as we work together to imagine, renew, and re-energize our community in life and mission. And we'll have a chance to remember our history, our favorite parts of the past that make us who we are today. We'll work together to discover our own special identity, what this community of Emmanuel dreams of being and doing, moving into the future with new possibilities. We'll work together to reinforce our good relationship with the diocese so that we can be of use to them and they to us, resources to each other. This is our shared earthly ministry. Remember, the church is not this building, as beautiful as it is. And it's not me, and it's not Bishop Nisley, it's not even the Archbishop of Canterbury or our presiding Bishop Michael Curry. In fact, as our EDS children do. You remember the children's room? Here is the church. Here is the steeple. Open the doors. See all the people. We're the church. We're the church together in community. This is our practice of God together. And this is how our Christian community of Emmanuel lives together in discipleship. We're not usually trying to figure out the difference between right and wrong. Instead, we're picking our way down this rocky road. Is 176 verses of the lawyer's song too long to remind us of the difficult but very rewarding path of love and reconciliation? Oh, how I love your law, the psalmist says. It is my meditation all day long. Or maybe it is only just long enough. We prepare ourselves for our shared ministry of discipleship in hope and in memory. Both are good, and they are interwoven.